Hello and welcome back to Simpsons Spin. My name is Tristan and I'm here with my wonderful co-host Nate. Today we will be covering Bart Gets an F, Season 2, Episode 1, originally airing on October 11th, 1990. And this is supposedly the most viewed episode, so that's pretty cool. And besides that, I really don't have any interesting facts or background information. Besides, it's a very Bart-centered episode. So, we start off the episode with Bart giving a book report that he obviously did not do. And Mrs. Krabappel picks up on this, so she gives him detention. In the detention, she scolds him for his declining grades. Bart knows he needs to study, but instead he procrastinates by going to the arcade or watching TV. But then at night, when Bart finally does get to studying, he falls asleep after reading a few sentences of the textbook. So, with the big test coming up the next day, Bart knows he's going to fail, so he ends up faking being sick. And when he's back home, he calls Milhouse for answers. The next day, he retakes the test and evidently fails. Bart is doing so bad that it's recommended that he retakes the third grade. Bart obviously does not want to retake the third grade. So there's an upcoming test about colonial America that if Bart passes, then he will be able to continue to fourth grade, but if not, he'll retake third grade. So knowing that Bart cannot pass it himself, he gets help from Martin in exchange for having all the other kids not pick on Martin and making Martin popular. But when it comes down to it, Martin does not hold up his end of the bargain, and Bart yet again cannot understand the information. So the night before the test, Bart prays to God, asking him to cancel school the next day, giving him a second chance to study and learn the information. So God hears his cry for help and does cancel school through a blizzard and lots of snow. The next day, Bart goes to go play out in the snow, but then is stopped and realizes that he was given a second chance and that he should use it, and goes back to studying, even though he'd rather do anything besides that. Bart then starts to hate himself because he cannot remember the information about colonial America. The next day, Bart takes the test and obviously fails. Mrs. Krabappel is not surprised by Bart failing, but is surprised by Bart's reaction to failing.
Well, what's the matter? Well, I would think you'd be used to failing by now.
No, you don't understand. I really tried this time. I really tried.
There.
This is as good as I can do, and I still failed.
Well, 59, it's a high F.
Who am I kidding? I really am a failure.
Bart starts to tear up and says he really did try, and if he failed this while really trying, he really is a failure. Bart then shows applied knowledge of the information, so Mrs. Krabappel bumps up his grade to a passing grade. Bart passes with a D-, but he treats it like an A+, and thus concludes the episode. So, Nate, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. All right, so I have a couple of thoughts here. First of all, and this one's just a personal thing, but overall, Bart is probably the most important character in the series. He's what really launched the popularity, and I think that this episode fleshes him out in a very impactful way. Throughout the episode, it's basically pretty heavily implied that Bart probably has ADHD or some other learning disability, and that is... the way that they depict it is very well done. People just sort of gloss over it. They think that it's just something about him. In the scene where he's talking to the psychiatrist about why he's been failing, they're asking him why, even though he obviously can't tell that. That's not him. It's not his fault. He's not doing this on purpose.
Bart has failed his last 4 exams in history. Is there anything you're not telling us?
No.
Every other student in the class has shown at least some form of improvement, and yet you continue to struggle. Why is that?
I don't know.
But look at these results. 55, 42, 26, a 12 on state capitals.
Okay. Why are we dancing around the obvious? I know it, you know it, I am dumb, okay? Dumb as a post. Think I'm happy about it?
There, Bart.
Another aspect of this episode I find pretty interesting is Martin, who is, of course, like a nerdier character in it. And he's kind of seen as he's kind of represented as like an anti-Bart, where he works very hard and gets good grades, but he's not as popular. He's picked on, and Bart, of course, changes him, basically. He teaches him his ways, and this changes Martin's attitude a lot, and he just like doesn't help Bart study or anything, which I just found interesting because it's kind of like offering this alternate character who Bart tries to help, but he ends up just making him different in too big of a way, which I think is kind of interesting as well, because it kind of speaks on like don't try to change yourself too much in that manner. And that could also be said about what Bart is like. That type of thing's good to me. Overall, this episode I feel like brought a lot of humanity to Bart as a character. He becomes more relatable to people who procrastinate or find it hard to just get work done, especially, I mean, myself included. Yeah, that's a great episode.
All right. Thank you, Nate. So throughout the episode, I think the jokes are pretty good. Like, this is a very emotional episode, but the jokes still definitely land, which is a claim to just The Simpsons can be very serious at times, but still get a joke out of you once in a while. And I want to touch on a few scenes, particularly when Bart is praying, because this is such like out of character for him, but it's not necessarily bad. Like, throughout the series, we see Bart isn't a religious person, but then we see him pray to God in like a last ditch effort, which is almost like moving in a sense, that like how dire the situation that Bart is in, and he understands like his problem. And another part that is very emotional is at the very end when Bart starts crying because he fails the test. And as the viewer, you know that everything he's saying about how he really did try is true, because you watched his arc throughout the episode of him actually trying. And that just makes it hurt even more as the viewer, because you have empathy and sympathy for Bart and understand his struggle. And I feel like this episode definitely is like, I definitely relate to this episode, and I feel like many people do relate to this episode, whether you have a learning disability, ADHD, dyslexia, whatever it may be, that everyone kind of understands Bart's struggle and is sorry for him. And I really think the moral of the episode is that you should be proud of your accomplishments, how little they may be. Like Bart, for example, he only gets a D- on his test, but he got a passing grade, but he treats it like an A+.
I passed! I got a D-. I passed! All right! I passed! I got a D-. I passed! I got a D-. I passed! I got a D-. I passed! Kiss the teacher!
Which everyone should be proud of their accomplishments, but know that there is more to be done and more work and effort to be put in. And like Nate said, it really fleshes out Bart as a character, and just has some really great moments of character development. And yeah, anything else you'd like to add, Nate?
I think that's it.
All right, so come back next episode where we will be covering Homer at the Bat. I'm not sure what season or episode that is, but that has been Simpsons Spin, and we hope you enjoyed, and come back next time. Thank you.